This is a Media Lab podcast.
Kyle, are you okay? What are you looking at?
I'm just hypnotized by the beauty of this plastic bag.
It's weird. I think that's compostable.
It's weird, actually. I think it's filled with like dog feces. And the weirdest thing is I don't own a dog.
Oh, that's disgusting. Could be the mouse.
Ugh, don't remind me. I'm gonna kill myself.
In his own garage, Kyle has built a machine, cobbled together with parts found in his friend's church basement and a dumpster behind the local Dairy Queen. This monstrosity is now alive and evil. Kyle has convinced his friend Dave to help stop the apocalypse by reviewing films the machine picks. The ultimate purpose is still unknown, and Kyle could have probably done this himself, but he's not being dragged to hell alone. This is Kyle and Dave versus the machine.
I'm so scared. I can't even walk around my own house. If people don't know, I may or may not have a mouse in my house still. One of them has definitely been thrown out of the house, but there could be others, and I'm not taking any chances. So
cruelly, I might add.
I pull a Michael Caine, and I just like huff ether and fall asleep and wake up and go about my day. Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine. My name is Kyle.
And I'm a depressed middle-aged man staring off. No, I'm Dave.
And I'm the Machine.
It's a podcast where a sentient machine forces us to watch movies in order to prevent it from initiating the apocalypse, although we do tend to talk about the ideas of the movie rather than the movie itself. Today, we're going to be watching the film American Beauty.
Morning, Jim.
Morning, Carolyn.
I love your tie, that color.
Nice going, Dad.
Ricky? Coming, Dad.
What the hell do you think you're doing?
We're having everyone write out a job description. That way management can assess who's valuable
And who's expendable?
My parents are trying.
Dave, American Beauty, I think, has, a pretty interesting role in the year 1999. I think that it had some interesting buzz that was going on about it. And I'm curious to jump into this movie again just to see how much it's actually held up over like the last 21 years. But I think where we need to start is the history of your relationship with this movie. And I don't know if you want to get into what your feelings are of Sam Mendes generally.
I can't remember if I watched this in the theater. I do know that I watched it with Helen on some type of rental. So that was definitely after 99 because we started in 2000, which was a long time ago, Kyle. I think we both thought it was very overrated.
Right.
Now, I don't remember how much I was aware of the build-up at the end of 1999. I wasn't that aware of anything. Wasn't doing so great. Wasn't doing so hot, Kyle, at the end of 99. Because I'm pretty sure, I don't know, when's the release of this? This is like Oscar bait, right? Like November,
yes.
December?
This, we'll get to that, but this was, in the fall time.
Okay, so yeah, that might explain part of it because I was pretty cross-eyed at that point. And Sam Mendes, though, he made my favorite Bond film. We've discussed that this year already. I love Skyfall. And just a quick look at his curriculum vitae, is that how you say it? I like pretty much everything he's made. So I like him a lot.
Just don't like his very first one.
Well, I mean, I get why it won. No, I don't. Yeah. That's okay. It was his debut. I'll forgive him.
I only bring that up. So just to kind of give you a history, if we just look at just the 90s, okay? So if we're just looking at the 90s, this was coming at the end of Unforgiven, Schindler's List, Forrest Gump, Braveheart, The English Patient, Titanic, and then the year before was Shakespeare in Love. So these are like gigantic, and in many cases, like these big budget historical epics. And this is the film that sneaks in and wins Best Picture in 1999. And I feel that even though we would return back to Gladiator the next year past this was really, I feel like the movement away from like the epic being like this is the obvious Oscar film that's going to win Best Picture to a much more indie-ish.
You can say it. Movies people don't watch.
It was this kind of big marking point or delineation in Oscar history of them moving away from the epic.
Just quickly, I mean, on that theme, we have talked a lot about how there's a building sense of cynicism growing by the end of the 90s. I agree,
and this is kind of the encapsulation of it.
Yeah, and then I guess next year there's a bit of a pushback, a denial, where they're like, oh, it got a little dark there, guys, so let's give it to Joaquin and Russell for stabbing each other. And then 2001, the world broke.
So things just kind of get
well,
weird.
not the first time, but that's an interesting observation of that group. I mean, you could argue Shakespeare in Love.
Yeah, you could. Yeah, was
the first.
Yeah,
slip?
I would agree with that. In that it was supposed to be supposed to be. Everyone thought it was going to be Saving Private Ryan that year, and then it didn't end up being the one that won. That's getting into Oscar lore and history, which is my thing. And who cares about the Oscars? I get that. American Beauty, I saw one, of course, on Oscar night. I don't know if you know this, Dave, but my theater burnt down in my small town when I was a kid.
What?
So I did not even have the chance of seeing American Beauty in theaters. Not that it would have played in Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, Canada. Not in a million years. So this was definitely a rental that I would have seen sometime in the year 2000. And I remember at the time actually quite liking it. I thought there was these darkly humorous bits. I aligned with like the teenagers in the movie. I was like 16 myself, so I was like, yeah, I don't want to be like the same as everybody else, man. That sort of mentality. That I know I've watched this a couple of times. I even recall vividly on the DVD, which I owned, of American Beauty, there was this like little featurette about like quote unquote like hidden things about the movie, and they went into like, this is why like there's this reflection on his computer screen because it's made to look like prison bars as he sits on his desk, and blah 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 blah, all the like pretentious like film major stuff that happens that I would have been totally into at that time, and now I find insufferable to listen to.
Your life is even sadder than I thought.
So I was in it. I was in this movie. But I have not sat down and been like, you know what I want to watch tonight? American Beauty. Like, I just haven't had that urge to go and sit down and watch it. So I'm kind of interested to see if my feelings towards the film are as positive as they were. I'm going to say 18 years ago, the last time I watched this movie, maybe.
Oh, you watched it a lot at once.
Like I definitely watched it a few times in university. But to be fair, though, I know I bring this up sometimes, and you get mad, but just looking at like things that are in the ether or the public consciousness, or are they still culturally relevant? American Beauty gifs are shared like all the time on the internet. I see them all the time. So whether it's making fun of like the plastic bag is so beautiful as being like the depiction of like pretentious art students, or substituting Mina Savari's head for somebody else for like rose petals falling down, like. There does seem to be a thing that people remember this movie for, and they still use and memify and like reuse till this day.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to ask a young person if they get the plastic bag.
Yeah, why is it funny? Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking, this is a great movie that I imagine your dad would have brought in, and you'd be sitting on a couch. Like, what was the other one? And you're just like hanging out watching a midlife crisis.
Yeah, we watched Fargo. We watched Sixth Sense together. We watched the first half of Deliverance before he took my sister out of the room because he knew what was coming up.
Oh my God. Your dad's pretty woke, Kyle. He's keeping you in it. It's great.
As a complete tangent, I don't know how many people know about Deliverance, but there is a very famous homosexual rape scene that happens partway through that film. By the way, hi Jen, who's watching this on our live stream on Google here currently. Get that watch time up. But my mother and us, the rest of the family, were all in the video rental store. And she's like, "Oh, I've heard some good things about Deliverance. We should watch this." Kyle's into film. And my dad's like, "I think we should maybe pick something else." And then she's like, "Oh, come on, we can watch this." And she kind of just like strong armed, and we rented it. So we're watching, and that's when my dad's like, "Hey, let's get some ice cream," and like literally like pushed my sister into the kitchen to go and get ice cream. And me and my mother together watched that scene,
nice.
And I have been traumatized for the rest of my life. I'm like, what is going on? Why did we rent this movie to watch as a family?
That's a formative experience right there. That explains a lot.
Do not like the movie Deliverance. So,
but Bert's so young. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's one of the few movies where he has no mustache.
I was gonna say it's like one of the weirdest things because he doesn't have a mustache. Like, this is not the Burt Reynolds that I know. Let's do this here then, Dave. Why don't I go thank some sponsors and like just scrub myself deeply to try and rid myself of the memory of watching Deliverance with my family. And then when we return, we'll be talking about the movie American Beauty.
I'm just imagining how great that family portrait would be.
Hey there, everyone. Just Kyle breaking into the episode one more time to tell you about all the great people that make this show continue to go. Here's one thing that they don't tell you about rose petals. When you sprinkle them across your floor and onto your bed in the hopes that that romantic gesture will breed some love and positivity into your life. It's for no other person than just for me. I put my own rose petals in my house as a trail to my bed because I'm a sad, sad man. No one tells you about the bugs. My house has now become a home to weevils and I think moths and these little stupid flies. But at the very least, they're keeping the spiders fed. Now I just need to keep that old woman who lives in the shoe out of my house. I should tell you that Kyle and Dave versus the Machine is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and supports their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. This week, Kyle and Dave versus the Machine is brought to you by ATB, and today I want to tell you about ATB's new podcast, The Future Of. You can join Todd Hirsch, ATB's Vice President and Chief Economist, as he connects with special guests who offer unique and useful perspectives about the future. Explore how our economy and communities can not only brace for change, but embrace the opportunity it creates. From the future of women in business to the changing nature of work itself, The Future Of helps us understand what's coming and what we need to do today to get the tomorrow we want. Featuring 2 episodes each month, plus bonus episodes, The Future Of includes interviews with top community and business leaders from Alberta and around the world. Subscribe to The Future Of in the Apple Store, Google Play, Spotify, and everywhere podcasts are found, and connect to ask your questions about the future by emailing thefutureof@atb.com. This episode of Kyle and Dave versus the Machine is also brought to you by the Calgary Foundation. Whether it's funding anti-racism programs, addiction recovery, or food hampers for the hungry, for 65 years, the Calgary Foundation has proudly supported the charitable community to address some of Calgary's biggest challenges. Now, during this period of unprecedented urgent needs, Calgary Foundation renewed its commitment to building a healthy, vibrant, giving, caring, and resilient community. If you're a registered charity looking for a grant, a professional advisor creating a giving plan for your client, or a donor wanting to give back to community, discover a wealth of resources at calgaryfoundation.org and learn more about their work through Calgary Foundation's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. All right, Dave. By the amount of notes that you took while watching that movie, I feel like this is going to go one of 2 ways. Either you have rescinded your negative feelings, or you're just as angry as you were 21 years ago watching this film.
Well, I'm always angry, apparently. I did not enjoy watching this.
Okay, well, to potentially jump way too far ahead here then and spoil the ending.
Don't spoil it.
In our non-spoilery section that we're in here right now. Is this like a hate this movie, or you just a dislike this movie? Is this this is the same as Idle Hands, or this is no, I just dislike this movie and don't think it's very good?
Yeah, that's a fair point. So this is not an Idle Hands. This is not a message in a bottle. I
Or
think
Blair
for me,
Witch.
or Blair Witch, or South Park for that matter. I think for me, actually akin to South Park, I think this is a better attempt at some political discourse or whatever you want to call it, cultural discourse about America.
Satire, yeah. It's attempting that at least, yeah.
Presumably dark humor, presumably satirical. I thought it was exhausting, and I felt myself upset the whole way. And it is, in my mind, heavy-handed. Heavy-handed is a good phrase. It's not very subtle, and I'm not even sure what the conclusions are. I mean, we'll get to that in the latter half, but I just don't understand what I was supposed to feel like at the end.
It was fascinating for me to rewatch this after so many years having not watched it. I am very much more positive about this movie than you are. I'm going to state that right up front. That being said, I think the third act of this movie, like the last third, is a complete mess. Because I agree with you, because I don't really know what I, as a viewer, am supposed to take from the message. And that is where the most heavy-handedness comes in, with dialogue that, in my opinion, is very poorly written.
Yeah. I mean,
and it's like, wait, what? Like, it feels to me like such a shift in that last little bit that I enjoy the first 2/3 so much. That it's just like, okay, whoa, what is happening here? We talk about like woke culture and stuff like that here in the year 2020, but this is like a precursor to it. I'm like, okay, like I get it. Like I understand what you're striving at, but it feels very, very much on the nose.
Talking about noses, I think you should get some work done.
Coupled with that is that this is very much a movie of its time. This is a very 90s movie dealing with very 90s things that I have a hard time believing that this is a film that in 20 years from now, anybody's even going to really be talking about anymore. Maybe the memes will survive and the aliens who come and take us over, like, what was with this movie with the rose petals? But it is very much like something we have been discussing this entire season. Like these are people dealing with this existential crisis of feeling like they're a cog in the machine and trying to break free from that. And what I wrote down, I think I finally cracked it, because I've asked this multiple times on this show. It's like, what is it about the 90s that's so much different than today? And I've never really been able to like throw it into specific language. Like nowadays, people feel like there's too much stuff happening, and in the 90s there wasn't enough stuff happening, I think is what the issues were. Like that's like the very reductive distillation of, I think, of what the crises were. Where in the 90s, like, I'm just waking up every day, going to the same job, going to this cubicle, and feeling like my potential is being squandered. Where it's still your potential being squandered, but it's like, I have so much stuff to do. I know absolutely everything that's going on in the world. I'm getting like so much more inputs every single day. I have to have 3 jobs in order to survive so that I can afford like even basic rent. Like there's those types of things that people are worrying about. And so I just say, unless we kind of cure that and come back around, I just don't see people like that are 19 years old right now being like, you know what my favorite movie is? American Beauty. Because I don't even see like they would have the context for it.
Nobody says that. So I understimulated versus overstimulated. When I spoke to some people who are either under 20 or have kids that are under 20, there's that movement where, you know, these young people are trying to disconnect from all the overstimulation and presumably getting, I mean, I don't think that's true, but presumably getting off social media and pulling away from the algorithm.
You'll never get away from me.
At least the kids that are in film school probably are. I see that. It's interesting, though, that under and over, you end up with the same existential crisis.
Right.
And the people end up having to do the same thing, which is blow up your own life. And the end result is often the same. I mean, without spoiling the movie, there's a framework of the classic midlife crisis that this movie is built around. And I think the comedic bit is pushing that to its extreme. Does it work, Kyle?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. For me, I find this movie incredibly funny for the first, I would say at least the first 40 minutes of this movie. And it's, you kind of have to lock into it, because I do feel like it's a very heightened, not quite like Quentin Tarantino-ish sort of thing, but they aren't really talking like normal people do. Like I'll grant you that. But the inflections that they have, like when Kevin Spacey buys himself that like little T-Bird Corvette or whatever car, Firebird, I think it is, and Annette Bening comes in, is like very gracefully like hanging herself in the doorway. It's like, what is that out there? And it's like, it's my new car. It's like, did you discuss it with me? I did not. You never drove it, and I shouldn't have to. Those types of like caustic, passive aggressive type things. All of that basically worked for me. Like everybody is awful to everybody else in this movie, basically, which is, it maybe not be the most fun thing.
Fun for you, Kyle.
But it's
That's
fun. It's
for
funny,
you?
and I think it's the lines. There's some standout lines for me, like the "I rule" when he throws the plate of asparagus against the wall. Like all of that stuff is great for me. Enough with this Lawrence Welk shit. I love that when he says that.
I think what twisted this right from the get-go, it runs a little too close to me. When they open up, I think he's 42.
Yeah.
I think his life's breaking apart, and I'm like, oh, they've got a kid. Their kid's significantly older than mine, but Helen and I were watching it. If Helen and I were watching it at the same time, we would have looked at each other and just been like, oh shit, like as different as it is how similar things are. But as you're bringing up, just the I don't know if we've used the word on record, but the caustic sort of extreme nature of everybody's relationship to each other made it very difficult for me to even find humor in it. I understand what you're saying, and I think that's a classic, maybe, I don't want to say American style, but there's a classic, satirical style of humor where people are just as mean to each other as possible. But in this one, I didn't find it charming at all. I found it kind of sick, and I couldn't latch on to enough of a redeeming characteristic in any of the parties to actually think it was funny.
And we'll get back to that, because I think in a weird way, the movie wants you to sympathize with a certain person that I don't really fully understand. Jen in the chat, by the way, on YouTube, where we're streaming here right now, also says that, and I think this is true for a lot of the Kevin Spacey films now, it already was an uncomfortable situation where he's lusting after a teenage girl, but now with his sexual assault allegations, it's not a great rewatch, because it's like, well, he kind of grew up to be this person. So there's a weird meta-ness to this whole entire movie too.
And not to be a defender, because, it's interesting, that looking back, he has only portrayed creepy people. It's like his niche, and he's very good at it. And B, he's like properly blacklisted. Although in my write-up, I do mention that does not hold up in Hollywood, as we see with Mel Gibson.
I mean, Mel Gibson came back after 5 years. I'm sure Kevin Spacey will be back.
And the reason I'm sure of that too is, allegedly, according to the internet, none of the allegations have actually held up in court yet. So as much as they're probably founded in something, as you brought up in your theater geek world, this is a known fact pre-Hollywood.
It was a known fact pre all the allegations.
Known reputation, anyways. We can't say fact, can we? That definitely paints this movie rewatch with a bit of a brush, because just from the get-go, as he's kind of breaking down, even before any of the child lusting comes out, it is very icky. Is that an academic word?
That is the actual technical term
Latin
for that feeling. It's icky.
Everyone in this room is icky.
Well, let's do this. I want to get into a lot of the spoilers of this movie so we can have a more full discussion. But let's do some backstory here first. So American Beauty was released on September 15th, 1999. And interestingly enough, nothing else was released on that day. So it kind of was released unopposed, at least here in the United States. So this is where, if we did a deeper dive, we might be able to figure out like exactly when some of these ratings were put in. But as of right now, on the internet, on IMDb, this movie is rated 8.3.
Wow.
It is rated 84 on Metacritic. And on Rotten Tomatoes, from 190 critics, it is rated 87%.
Crazy.
And from 660,576 users, it is rated 93%.
Wow.
So it is very highly regarded as far as the internet goes. Now, I was mentioning to you, Dave, off mic and off this podcast, depending where you go, I am a big Letterboxd fan. And on there, it seems like, I don't know why, it was probably because last year was the 20th anniversary, so there was a bunch of like newer reviews that were popping up on that site. And the somewhat critical consensus, at least from the film Twitter that I follow and film community that I follow on Letterboxd, is that it doesn't hold up. That people are like, I rated it highly back then, but I don't regard it very highly anymore. It hasn't aged very well. So I don't know. I don't know if that's just like retconning your past or what that kind of comes down to, but it doesn't seem in my very small study that this film is as highly regarded today as it was back then.
Just quickly, after, again, we allegedly just watched this, I also went on IMDb and I was incensed to see some of the reviews because they're ridiculous. So what I did, I sorted it in the negative review columns, and you should read some of the 1-star reviews because some of them are actually quite intellectually thought out. You know, typically with the 1-star review, it gets it gets very internet-y, right?
Fucking blows.
I don't
Hated
like
it.
your face. You know, I ate the wrong Snickers bar, so I don't wanna, stuff like that. But this is one of the first times I've read internet comments where I'm sitting there like, oh yeah, I don't know if that's a 1-star review per se. I mean, the number's a bit hating, but some very good direct points. And just to your point, many of the 1-star reviews are actually over the last 5 years, and all of the 5-star reviews are from 99, 2000, and 2001. So there's been a cultural shift. That's for sure, which is not fair, I guess.
Well, I don't know if it's not fair or not, but I think that is something to be aware of. Again, like context matters, I think, in a lot of these things. Something I retweeted here the other day. It drives me nuts when people kind of go off on the movie without talking about its context. Not that you have to like movies that are older than, the year that you were born, but at the same time, it's like, well, let's look at this without like literally the last 47 years and see what was going on at that time and why people might have been more attuned to it. And then reevaluate it in current times. I have no problem with that. I find that this is, again, tending for me to get into like old man yells at cloud territory. But it feels like to me that a lot of the times is like, I don't watch movies from this time period, and I'm not going to watch movies from this time period because they're all bad and they come from this point of view. And so I'm just going to watch this stuff over here. And I don't know. I just find that pretty limiting to your outlook of the history of film if you're only looking at one small portion of it.
Becomes like a reverse bias. This is the thing with cancel. I mean, we brought this up in Boys Don't Cry. We brought this up in another movie where cancel culture is saying that, they should have had a trans actor portraying Hilary Swank. Yeah. And that is not a sane opinion. There's no point in saying that out loud. Number one, because as we learned, the context of that movie was that character had not actually transitioned yet and was still technically female. And number two, as much as I'll never watch that movie again, that was a good movie. So get over it. It brought up the points that people are still upset about. This movie will be the same. Well, any movie like that will be the same thing. I do think I agree with you, Kyle. Imagine that. They should just watch a movie. All right, well, right? Just watch the movie.
Thank you for listening to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine. Kyle, Dave has actually agreed with me for once. Okay.
Shit.
Is it possible for me to cancel the two of you?
It is available on DVD or Blu-ray. You can buy or rent it on iTunes. You can also rent it on YouTube. It is also available to stream on Prime, Amazon Prime. What's up, stars? You're failing us once again. I thought you were our sponsors and you don't have it on your service. So this is the part where things are going to get wild. So its budget... Do you want to guess the budget, by the way, of this film, Dave?
Nope.
Okay. Just to put in context, last week we talked about The Insider.
Yeah.
All right. And probably a lot of that budget was maybe Al Pacino's asking price. I don't know.
Probably.
That movie was made for $90 million. Okay. This movie, American Beauty, was made for $15 million. Wow. That is such a low budgeted movie.
Yeah, I mean, Annette
for
Bening's
how good it looks
well,
and the actors that they got to be involved in this, I'm just so shocked that it's that low.
What's interesting about that is, I mean, Annette Bening, as much as she's such a celebrated actress, this is 99, so women were not considered humans, so she was probably not making a lot of money for being an actress, which sucks. Kevin Spacey's he's already won an Oscar, but he's kind of a character actor at that point, right? I mean, he's not...
Supporting actor, I would say that, yeah.
So he's not Al Pacino, asking for 7-8 figures. And then the rest of them, like Chris Cooper hadn't really blown up.
I guess that's right. I guess maybe they're all like that supporting actor, actress category stuff. Yeah. So at most, they're probably asking for maybe $1 million each, and then you can put all the rest of it into the actual production design. It opened... It had a... limited release, so it opened to $861,000, but would go on to make $130 million domestically, and then pick up another $226 million internationally.
That is a grand total of $356 million. It was the 9th highest grossing film of 1999. If you just want to look at how different 1999 was, where American Beauty could be the 9th highest grossing movie of the year.
How fascinating that such a so-called dark comedy could make that much money.
Yeah. Well,
So
I will
maybe it
also say,
deserved to make.
again, back then, even though like the ratings were already starting to fall, there was a thing called the Oscar bump. Like when a movie won Best Picture, you could actually see the next weekend like increasing dramatically
That's right.
over the
Yeah,
next
yeah.
weekend.
They always
And
re-release them.
most of the time back then, like all 5 of the films that were nominated were probably still in theaters
Right.
when the telecast was there. So yeah, the people
Or they
would
do
go
the
back out.
re-release
Yeah.
with the new branding.
Correct. Yeah. Its plot description from IMDb is: a sexually frustrated suburban father has a midlife crisis after becoming infatuated with his daughter's best friend. It stars Kevin Spacey as Lester Burnham, Annette Bening as Carolyn Burnham, Wes Bentley as Ricky Fitz, Thora Birch as Jane Burnham, and Mina Savari as Angela Hayes. So we've talked about Kevin Spacey here already. Anything else you want to say about any of those actors?
There's not actually a lot, which is a little bit surprising. The interesting thing is silly, but is it Thora or Tora Birch?
Oh, is it? I don't know. Maybe I'm saying her name wrong.
No, I just don't know. But her parents were pornography actors. And they
Shut
were in,
up.
They
What?
were in Deep Throat.
Shut up. I
Yep.
had no idea.
Blew your mind there.
By the way, if no one knows, there was this weird period in the late 60s, early 70s where like pornographic films were shown in literally just like your average
Theaters.
multiplex and became high grossing films. And some of them were even nominated for Academy Awards. So Deep Throat was like this big, like one that like, oh God, burst through the glass ceiling, so to speak, of art house and like pornography. That's wild. I had no idea.
Let's take a look here. So that was good. Chris Cooper, I mean, again, not a lot. The tragic thing about Chris Cooper is him and his wife had a son who died. So he had cerebral palsy, which sucks, and then died of an epileptic seizure. So that was a little dark for me to read.
Right.
The other thing that's interesting is his dad was an Air Force doctor, and he was also a cattleman, which I think you understand what that term means. I think it means he's half cow, half man. And a carpenter.
Yeah, he's like RoboCop, except for cows.
A dog man actually is the present thing, Kyle, if you read books.
Oh, I'm sorry.
like
I'm
the
not a
best.
cultured man.
So apparently he got into theater because he had learned some carpentry through his farming and started building sets.
Yeah, I don't know if it's still up or not because I think they put it behind a paywall after so many episodes. But Chris Cooper had a very long, like over an hour-long conversation with Mark Maron on the WTF podcast, and he goes through a lot of that stuff. He's a really interesting dude because he feels like he feels like a military guy just himself, like he carries himself that way. He also, to look at, and for a lot of the roles he takes, you would think would be like hardcore conservative, and he is very much not. He is very much the opposite way. So
Yeah, it's
interesting guy.
I did note that he always plays an angry military guy. But and then Peter Gallagher I just put in because he's got great eyebrows. So
He does. He has amazing eyebrows.
incredible eyebrows.
If I was talking like top 3 eyebrows, you have him, Eugene
Jack.
Levy.
Oh yeah, like
End of
thickness and
list.
girth.
Are we
You know,
talking about
it'd be-
Deep Throat again? What are we
I
doing
think
here?
I think we need to do. We'll have to do a side by side comparison because now I'm thinking of Eugene.
Mhm.
And that'd be a fascinating competition.
Eyebrows weird me out.
This was written by Alan Ball, who started on television writing episodes for Grace Under Fire and Sybil, which
So
is
weird.
like exactly my kind of jam. Then he wrote this. He jumped to create and write for 6 Feet Under, which is considered by many to be on the short list of best television shows of all time.
Yeah.
And it usually does also show up on one of the best TV finales of all time. I don't know because I've never seen a single episode of 6 Feet Under, so I don't know if you have.
Nope. No, I haven't. Was that an HBO show? I don't know. It
I
wasn't.
think it
on
was HBO, yeah.
That's not a regular, plebe television channel.
He would follow that up by helping, I forget if he was a creator for this as well. He definitely wrote for True Blood. This is maybe a very unpopular opinion. I find True Blood to be basically unwatchable, but
Yes.
I really dislike that show. Like
awful.
I tried getting through a single episode and had to turn it off halfway through. Like I hated it that much. So
This is why we get along. Same thing. I can't remember how we got. Maybe it was on Showcase or something. But I tried to watch one episode and I almost punched myself in the face. I thought it was awful. I mean, you want to talk about pornography and the merging thing of what do you call it? Mass media. That's basically a pornography television show, which is fine. You can watch porn. Just watch it for free. Why pay for HBO?
I kept watching that half of an episode and being like, every actor that came on that I recognized was like, Anna Paquin, you deserve better. You don't need to be in this show.
Although, I don't know. She didn't really get anywhere either.
He also wrote and directed the movie Towelhead. I've never seen that either. Upcoming is a film called Uncle Frank, which was released 2 days ago on November 25th.
Oh.
On November 25th, which was, again, 2 days ago. He also directed that, by the way. He wrote and directed that. The big thing that's important to me about Alan Ball is that there is always a subtext or very much a text bit of homosexuality in his work.
Yes, and apparently this thing I thought was annoying is he's a very loudly proclaimed Buddhist, and apparently a plastic bag happened to him. So that's fucking annoying.
Oh. Wow, see, that's a problem right there.
Yeah, good for you, dude.
He spent too much time looking at plastic bags, not enough time sitting underneath the Bodhi tree. That's his mistake right there.
For Sam was knighted this year.
Oh, was he?
So he might be a sir. No.
He could be Sir Sam Mendes.
Sir Sam Mendes. But it was for his work in the theater. Apparently he's a big deal.
Yes, I was going to say, I knew him originally for his theater work as a director, which is, depending on who you ask, kind of divisive. You were kind of an either love him or hate him in his theater pieces. I know him primarily from 2 Stephen Sondheim things that he did. He did a 1996, I want to say, or in the 90s somewhere, the Donmar Warehouse version of Company. So he cast all African Americans in the roles. That wasn't what the divisive thing was. It's that he didn't cast singers. He casted actors first, and then they were so-so singers instead of casting singers first that could act the roles. I will say, though, it's actually one of the greatest performances of some of those songs is from that production, in my opinion. So I think he won out. He also did a production of Gypsy, which was very divisive, where a lot of people walked out of that production, basically making the Mama Rose character more sexualized than she'd ever been before, because you cast Bernadette Peters, who can't not play a sexualized thing when she's in a role. I love that production. I think it's great, but there's a lot of detractors that really, really dislike that version of Gypsy. He is also the one responsible for basically, if you know anything about cabaret in its current form on Broadway and revivals and the traveling shows that go through, that's the Sam Mendes version of cabaret. He sexualized it and had people like half nude on stage, that sort of thing. It's not the Joel Grey version of cabaret that you know from the movie version, but he reconcepted it, and basically that's the way that cabaret has been performed ever since he did it that way.
So he likes sex, which is good. I have actually a third Stephen Sondheim thing. In 1990, when he had his first artistic director appointment for, I can't remember which studio he's redeveloping, he produced his first Stephen Sondheim play called Assassins.
Oh, I didn't know he did an Assassins. That's interesting.
Just blew your mind a couple of times on this episode, Kyle. This is crazy.
Assassins has a really great... do you know anything about Assassins?
No, I don't know.
I'm not talking about the Antonio Banderas movie from the 90s. It's a good movie. Assassins is a play and musical about all the times an American president has been or attempted to be assassinated. And it's all the assassins kind of coming together and kind of going through their stories. And basically the theme of that is that if the message of America is to follow your dreams, then the logical conclusion of that is to go and kill people so that you can fulfill your dreams and stuff as well. Like that's the corruption of Americanism. And boy, does that play not go over well with a lot of American audiences. Let me tell you that.
There's some themes here for Sir Sam. There's some themes. Yeah. And the only other thing is, the other thing for you is apparently Marvel asked him to direct the Avengers, which he turned down, and then they went to
Joss Whedon. Are you talking
about? Right.
Yeah.
But it could have been a Sam Mendes movie, so we'd got a lot more sex, showers, and anti-American messaging, which would have been better,
maybe.
Frankly. Yeah, different.
By the way,
different MCU.
Jen in the chat is saying how lovely today, November 27th is. So just thought
It's a cold
state
one
that
out
again.
there. Or warm. It's
Or
Calgary.
warm.
Yeah, it could be really hot.
Really, that could be either. And it is. So as far as films go, if we want to have like a quick like overview, this was his first directing gig. Then he would do Road to Perdition, which I'm actually a big fan of. Again, haven't revisited in years, so I don't know if it holds up or not. Jarhead, which I remember being like, okay. And then Revolutionary Road, Away We Go. I didn't watch either of those. Have you seen those two films?
I don't know. Which is Away We Go, the one with John Krasinski? No, that's a different
Yes,
one.
it is. Yes,
okay.
it is. And his then wife,
Is
Maya
it-
Rudolph, but is not his wife currently.
Wait, he was married to Maya Rudolph?
I think I could be conflating that with something
No.
else. Now
I
that
think
I
that was
say
just
that.
in the show.
Okay.
But
But then we jumped to James Bond. Like you said, did Skyfall and Spectre. One of those movies is good. And then recently directed 1917, which
Yeah.
I was a big fan of. But again, I know there were some big detractors out there
still
for
haven't
that
been able to
movie.
watch it because my movie partner won't let me press play on that. So I'll have to find a dark corner somewhere for that single take. I really want to see the single take, man.
Yeah, I mean, no better way to watch a big war epic than on the smallest screen you can possibly find.
Every movie is made better by squinting.
Let's get into some spoilers here for American Beauty. I guess, I don't know where you want to start with this, Dave. Like, what is it about this movie that just grinds your gears so much?
Well, I don't know where to start either. I mean, I think the difficulty for me getting into this, base structure and intent of kind of poking, not fun, but maybe criticizing American culture in 1999. You know, I'm all about that. I think, mass consumerism, the American dream, suburban lifestyle, all that stuff is inherently poisonous. And so any kind of attempt to highlight that should be a win for me. But there's just something about this movie. I think it plays on tropes that I'm aware of because we watch American films, but I don't participate in. You know, like you brought up the dining room scene. So this is what hits a little close for home. I mean, we have 3 people in our family and we eat dinner together. And so there's a 42-year-old man, his wife, and their child eating dinner. And we listen to music when we eat.
Yeah, but can I ask you, do
Yeah.
you listen to Bally High from South Pacific?
No,
'Cause that's the original one that they're listening to at the dinner table. So
Well, and that's the thing. So it's not like we live this life, but
Right.
it is weird because, it's this depiction of an American. And maybe it's because Sam Mendes is from the UK, and I can't remember if the writers. No, he's American, but the portrayal of America. Actually, we talked about this in so many of these movies. The portrayal of America, whether it's small town or big city, I do have a little bit of a disconnect. So. Watching them in a giant house, miserable, sitting at a table that's too big for them. I mean, that's a trope, but it was making me feel disconnected. I didn't care, and they're angry. I'm like, yeah, I've seen it before.
you know what?
And,
I was going to wait until the end to talk about this, but I think part of the issue is, and this is such like me getting on my soapbox, I think Alan Ball has the wrong main character.
yeah,
I don't think we should be following Lester's story. I think we should be following his wife's. 'Cause
yes.
I think hers is the more interesting downfall. While ultimately, yes, it's Lester who gets shot in the head, and like it's like this interesting intrigue mystery of like I'm already dead, and let's find out like how I end up dead in this story. I find it's her story about like used to being like quote unquote in his description fun loving and wanting to go
Free,
in for
yeah.
adventures and like being so self consumed by image and getting ahead. Like that is an interesting, I think, story into like the American dream and how it can corrupt you. Because I wrote down a bunch of different things about like her entire existence is so exhausting to me. Like just watching her like putting up appearances, talking to people, like up beneath the roses, going to show the
Slapping
house,
herself. Holy shit!
and it's just like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, like I just doing that much. But then I wrote it down. Like there's that moment after she shows the house, and it's like not a great house, but she's trying to get this off the
slapping
market.
herself. Yeah.
But yeah, the slapping herself,
Oh
saying
my
like
god.
1,000%. Her breakdown, crying is like, just like shut up, like get your
Weak
game
little
face
baby.
on.
Yeah, I wrote that down.
Almost every single retail employee has done that during Christmas. I guarantee you, I have done that before in my life. Like just like fighting through tears because
You
you
get
just
back
like
up there. You show them how that fucking Touch ID works.
well, you're not too far off it. But I mean, I'm just saying that like I think that actually is much more universal than what this movie even thinks that it is like that feeling of like, I'm just trying to do my best and my best isn't good enough right now, and that crumbling of yourself be based on your job.
You know where I think that also would work much better is this weird zombie role that they put Allison Janney in, because I do not
Right.
understand that character at all. But it would have been fascinating as a comparison between having been broken and just completely, right, apparently, I don't know what it is, catatonic, versus the opposite, where she's trying so hard, she's eating herself up from the inside. Instead, I mean, I get why, with the backstory, Alan Ball wants this to be so strongly about homophobia and about sort of the male sexual experience. But the moment Kevin Spacey's standing there naked, pumping iron for like 45 fucking minutes, every scene, it's so creepy.
He does get kind of ripped, though. I mean,
Well, he was pretty strong to begin with, but I don't know. Even without the context of who Kevin Spacey turned out to be in the public sphere, it is very weird that we spend so much time, even as a setup for the big sort of shocking finale. It's heavy. And, you have the nice gay couple with, what's his face from
Scott
Quantum Leap?
Bakula?
Yeah, and they disappear.
Did he disappear or did he just leap home for the final time?
It's a setup to show some tension, and they're just written out of the movie entirely.
Yeah, there is a lot of setups that I don't know get entirely paid off by the end. I'll grant you that. I think that there's enough thematic through lines for me that pull me through. I mean, I'm thinking of, there's that party that Lester and Carolyn go to, and he's introduced to eyebrows guy.
Peter Gallagher.
Introduced to Peter Gallagher, and he's like, he doesn't remember Kevin Spacey at all. He's like, don't worry, I would have forgotten me too. I have unironically said that before in my life, being introduced to someone like for the third time, and I'm not remembering who I am. I think what this movie does a great job at is, again, showing the ridiculousness of things that we prioritize in our lives. It's not that they aren't important necessarily, it's that maybe we put too much stake in them throughout our lives, whether that's our job, the thing that like bores me to tears and aggravates me to no end, which is homeowner politics. About like, this tree's roots is in my yard and blah, blah, blah. And it's like overhanging this way. And like your property line is actually 2 inches that way. So why is your, like, anytime like those types of conversations come up in my real life, I'm like, just fix it then. I don't care. Like, what do you want to do? And let's do it. Because I have no investment in the solution to this. So just do what you want to do. But so many people like make that their whole entire life being of like regulating the community that they're in, sort of thing. The way that this does treat homosexuality, I think, is pretty on the mark for what the late 90s were. Sure, there was opening up a little bit. Ellen had come out on television. There was like gay and lesbians being shown in somewhat positive lights in media and that sort of thing. But by and large, I would say that the father's reaction to that is pretty close to true for what a lot of gay and lesbian people had to go through in the late 90s.
And that's the thing, the core of the intent of how the thing's written to bring up these concepts, I'm on with. It's not a disagreement. Yeah, let's say with the Chris Cooper character, that is an inaccurate situation. I mean, we've seen it in news. I mean, I wrote down, what was that, Orlando nightclub shooting, or like any of that stuff where people, I wrote bracket Jason Kenney, but we don't have to keep that on the thing either. But,
Sure.
We see this tension and how people get wrapped up. And so it's not a bad thing, and it's not a bad theme that, I don't disagree with the theme of how the movie is. I didn't find myself enjoying it. And by the time that the big reveal was about to happen, it had become so off the wire. Like you talk about the third act, it becomes so physically violent and so nonsensical. I couldn't even understand the finale with Annette Bening and the gun and the fucking raining and the SUV. Like, I was just like, is she gonna kill somebody too? Like, I don't understand what's going on here, because they lost it.
To expand on that, like I think, and this is all because I don't know if the movie necessarily leads me up to fully supporting this. I think the idea is that she's driving home to divorce her husband and potentially to kill him too. Like, that's what it feels like it's driving up to. I think that the movie wants her to be mystery of like, who is the actual killer of Kevin Spacey.
It's over in like 20 seconds.
I know. So you're thinking it's Annette Bening because that's the one we see the gun with. and then it actually turns out to be Chris Cooper. But it could also be like this guy's son. Like, we just don't know who is, because he jokes about killing him like first thing in the movie is one of the first things that we hear.
It's not set
So
up well.
I think there's this mystery element that gets added. It's like, I don't know if you really need the mystery element to be there.
No.
I think that's where the heavy-handedness comes in, because that's like, there's the confrontation of like the two lovers that are going to run off to New York. It's like, we're always going to be freaks, and we're going to be freaks together, and we're not going to be around the normals like you. And I was like, I don't know if anyone will understand this reference, but when she was on the show, Saturday Night Live, Vanessa Bayer had this character of like the over-exaggerated like supporting character in a teen movie. And that's what it sounded like to her, like the over-enunciation. It's like, and we'll never be with you anymore. Like, that's basically what it sounded like. I'm like, okay, like, this is a little bit overdone.
That's, Mina Savari is a little bit wasted with that too. I mean, outside of the initial setup of her alleging that she enjoys the company of men in this sort of pseudo Marilyn-esque kind of thing, her character starts thinning out into this. I guess it's supposed to be a pantomime of teenage sexual American culture.
Right.
And then the irony,
we think we want the schoolgirl, but it turns out we actually don't want.
And the flip side of, the irony of her lying about it to get popularity, and turns out she's a virgin. Like, all of that stuff is, and the mystery thing is a great thing too. Great point too. It doesn't work for me. I didn't find myself caught up in it. It felt like, and maybe it's because there are too many movies, that came after that play on these same things. I don't know, but it felt predictable to me. Where did I notice that Chris Cooper is likely going to be a closeted man? I thought it was, kind of thrown at you from the get-go, but maybe that's just me in 2020. I have no idea.
Yeah, I think that might be a 2020 reading. I think that's a more modern thing. Like, the more you disagree with the gay lifestyle, the more gay you are going to be. Mostly because we've seen like a half dozen American senators do the exact same thing in their life.
Yeah, that might be part. But it also plays into A, what we always ask whether this movie holds up, and B, I was not able to kind of strip that away from it.
Just to mention some of the things here, like some of these are like can be used as a time capsule, but I just think the mentality behind all these things are just, it's lost on us now. But like actually having an address book, using star 69, having a beeper that is shown in this movie, like just even the cars and stuff that they're driving in this movie is like so hilariously 1999. But there's a feeling of quaintness in this movie that I didn't feel back in 1999 that I now feel like, oh, this is like a very almost naive outlook to the idea of what we now call toxic masculinity, that I think has been better and more fully explored in more modern films. Which, by the way, just because, Nazism seems to be on the rise again, the fact that he has like that Nazi plate and showed it to me, if I was the girl in that situation, that is the point where I would have noped out of that relationship pretty quickly.
Because if you're the type of woman that's attracted to a guy who videotapes you in the dark, there is no nope at that point.
Videotaping people in the dark is what I consider second base.
Just a quick interesting fact about that scene. Chris Cooper talked about how to build for this character, he had friends who were vets and he interviewed them to just get into the mindset. And it just made me think this is probably anecdotal from some of his friends who have been through these situations. Because
they kept a Hitler plate.
Yeah, or the fascination with war, right? For good or for ill. I mean, most of the idea of what we talk about with PTSD, and I have struggled fitting in, but if I had either directly killed, been shot at, or been around an environment in which I'm trying to be intentionally dehumanized so that I can easily kill or be killed, you're not going to come back into a suburban house and be quote unquote normal. It's impossible, right?
Sure.
You can't fit in. So I don't know if it implies he's a Nazi, but it is an interesting idea to be fascinated with death in that way, that you would have this glass case. The other thing that I think by the end got too heavy-handed, I mean, it's essential for how the characters discover each other and come to the critical thing, but just this idea of the rear window thing where everybody can see each other all the time so that we can get all of these images of nudity, implied blowjobs, breasts, all of that stuff because they're all looking at each other through these open windows. That's a weird...
But isn't it beautiful that he always focused on her face rather than her breasts, Dave?
One thing I wrote down was I'm glad that he was a better camera operator than the idiots in Blair Witch. Yeah.
The Blair Witch people. Yeah, he should have been the one filming the documentary. They would have
I
gotten out of the woods.
I saw everything. I didn't throw up, and you know, his ability to steady cam through the plastic bag was ingenious. It was art, Kyle.
Yeah.
That was art.
By the way, did you notice who one of the home buyers was?
Home button. Oh, Harold was there.
Yeah, John Cho was.
Yeah.
Which is his second cameo. By the way, this is only something that you notice if you watch like a lot of movies, and especially if you do something like we do, we're watching it all from the same year. So he has his 5-second cameo in She's All That. Is that the movie that he's in?
No,
he's in this for like less than that, like 2 seconds.
American Pie.
It's American Pie. It's American Pie. He's in
Yeah.
American Pie. He's in this for like 2 seconds. And he's also in like a short cameo in the film Bowfinger, also released in 1999. So it's so
This is why
weird
he
to
made
me.
it. Because he's
I know.
hustling, man. He's
in
hustling.
this like these 3 little bit parts, and then Harold and Kumar came out 2 years later, I think.
I don't know when, but yeah, he made it. He's
Yeah. So good to see
changing the
John
face.
Cho,
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to say.
We don't have to see Mickey Rooney. No, we won't do that.
I have to tell you, Dave, like I don't even want to say this, but I mean, I felt racist because I was like, was that John Cho? Just because it's like an
'Cause they all look
Asian
the
guy
same.
that I saw. And then I looked it up. It's like, oh, it was John Cho. And I saw it for like half a second.
I feel like there was somebody else in the Homeowners that I recognized, like as a sort
Right.
of side character actor, but it doesn't really matter.
Similarly, it's also the second time we've heard Bob Dylan this year. So weirdly, in 1999, Bob Dylan seemingly was in a few different movies here for us. We'll see if he shows up again.
I couldn't understand the rose petals. I know it's a meme.
Well,
I think it's supposed to be comedic, and maybe this is because it's pre-free porn on the internet, where
I guess.
sexuality has become quite brutal, actually. But
I think it's a writer
weird.
showing off his writeriness, to be perfectly frank. Annette Bening is pruning roses the first time we
Yeah.
see her.
she's always
so
in that
she,
red, yeah.
you know, she's in red and she's like, yeah, she's controlling the flowers to be perfect and beautiful. Petals, of course, are when they actually like break
Wilt.
apart.
Yeah.
But plucking flower is a euphemism for plucking someone's virginality from them. So I think that's all. I honestly think that's all it is that the rose petals is there to be seduction as well as showing off like having sex with a woman. Go and read like poetry from the 1700s, and it's always I pluck this and I pluck that and blah blah blah.
Well, you know, like do some plucking, right? You pluck it.
I've plucked in my day, if you know what I mean.
No. Oh, Jesus.
I'm completely lost.
No, I thought it was weird. And it's not fair to bag on special effects from the 1990s, but we
Boy,
have...
I agree. That did not hold up, did it? I was shocked at how bad that looked.
And you know what? For 15 million, like now looking at it, for 15 million bucks for a directorial debut, for I think it's Alan Ball's first and only kind of script, I should be more forgiving. But it is a bit jarring in 2020 to even have the idea to depict his first fantasy. What was it, like the roses are pouring out of her body instead of showing her breath? I can't remember how it worked. But
That's exactly right. She opens
Yeah.
up her shirt and it like spews out, and
It was
it's
weird,
very
man.
early 3D modeling and
Yeah.
stuff. It doesn't look great
But even the
anymore,
concept of that was kind of weird. And maybe that's just, you know, there's a thought and a storyboard, and then you got to make it into a visual effect. So maybe it just is, but
Yeah.
it tripped me up a little bit. I don't know. At one point, and the lighting, some of the lighting switches, you know, when he's in bed and all of a sudden it's midday, maybe that's meant to be dreamlike and comedic, but it just threw me off. I didn't even understand what was going on anymore. So
Yeah, I think it's metaphor more than anything else. Of course, we're leaving this to like the last as we're about to wrap up here. Some of the themes I think are very resonant for me, and some maybe not so much. I think the core one is essentially the life philosophy that Lester Burnham has versus the Chris Cooper character, because Chris Cooper is all about like, you can't just go around and do what you want. Like he says that a couple different times. You can't go around and just do what you want. Yet that's kind of what Lester eventually says. Like, I am just going to do what I want. I've lived long enough. I tried to do what society told me to do and was unhappy. So I'm just going to do what I want to do, and I'll just be happier for it. So there's that mixed with this idea of like being normal is actually the worst thing that you can ultimately be. And I kind of finally figured out how much this movie has sunk its teeth into me and how much it probably influenced me as a young guy, because that is something I've held on to for the majority of my life, that being normal is something to look down upon, rightly or wrongly. I'm not saying that I'm necessarily even agree with that, but it's definitely made me I don't know. This is probably why I went to therapy for so many years, because I was so like frustrated by the fact that I'm such an average person that I hate it, that I don't stand out in front of anyone. And therefore that equals bad in my head. And I think this movie, I'm blaming this movie, Dave. This is the movie that caused me to think all this.
Kyle, you do stand out because every time we used to go and find you at the Apple Store, we just looked for the tallest person in the fucking room. But no,
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I understand what you're talking about. I think I wrote down that there are similar themes like, right, Fight Club, Office Space.
Yeah,
There's a couple.
yeah.
I mean, is he the Tyler Durden of this movie? I don't know. It's a weird thing, but
He wasn't there the entire time.
yeah, well, that's the other thing. I mean, there's a bit of I don't know if he was trying to be forgiving of Kevin Spacey's character, but you end up with that question, kind of like you bring up: has he actually done anything wrong? So he's lusting after this teenager. He's quit his job. He's breaking up with his wife. He's verbally assaulting his daughter because of his own demons. And I've kind of lived that life a little bit. Like, unlike you, where you're describing having watched this early and having this thought process where you want to stand out. I mean, whatever my thought processes were, I did do the Chris Cooper thing and have a shitty job and just be angry and kempt, pent up. But I don't know, man. Like, you have to pay a price for all of it. And maybe the idea is that he gets shot in the head and that's the culmination. But the shot in the head actually turns out to be the homophobia and the closeted sort of repression piece, I think. It doesn't actually have anything to do with him. So I thought it was kind of weird.
Well, again, everyone is so self-involved. Like, they're all they're only
so
really ever
selfish.
thinking about themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
So I didn't find, not only there isn't a single person that I think is redeeming, I also think any kind of moral center is lost in it because it strays too much at the end.
It definitely strays way too much at the end, and it gets too, like, I don't know, self-masturbatory. That it really did turn me off, like, the last 20 minutes of this movie.
Right? You do start with him jerking off in the shower, so, and you see Kevin Spacey's butt, which is probably
to be honest,
improv.
It looks like a great birthday to me. But I guess the only other thing, just to put a button on that, I think is why I find it so effective, is the only thing that kind of does work for me thematically in that last little bit is that because Chris Cooper has been so adamant about, like, there's regimen, there's ways you do things, you can't just do what you want. The one and only time he goes and does what he wants, which is go and kiss the Kevin Spacey character, he's rebuffed, shut down, and he totally loses his mind over it. He has to, like, right that wrong of this thing that he's been pushing down so much inside of him, sort of thing. So those are the types of themes that they bubble up, even with the stuff that I don't necessarily like. There's things here that still grab me.
I think, as you were bringing up with Annette Bening, a more direct way to tackle that in a revisionist sense would be to dwell there at least for 5 more minutes to kind of get into Chris Cooper's head or backstory about some of the things he's experienced, maybe in the military or in his childhood, to kind of mirror why he's, close fist punching his pothead son, even before it's about being gay. It's like he's just beating the shit out of that kid. And the kid, we haven't talked about the plastic bag or the weird son. I mean, I don't know if learning about this idea of proclaiming to be Buddhist, I don't know if he's supposed to be a Buddha. I mean, he's so disconnected from anything.
Yeah, again.
But he's also corrupted, right? He's a drug dealer.
Well, I was going to say, like, he's corrupted by... He's being this artist, yet still such a capitalist at the same time.
Right.
And maybe there's a comment on that about how, like, every hippie eventually becomes, like, a hardcore capitalist.
But it's
over
not
time.
a becoming, right? He's a duality. That scene where he's selling $300 for a pound.
By the way, I don't know if you were ever a weed guy, but is that realistic in the 90s? That seems so high to me, but I actually have no idea.
No, I mean, the $3,000 is insane, and that's the capitalist part, the medical grade shit. But I just remember when they were approaching the bedroom and he asked, what was it for, like, an ounce? And I was like, that's a lot of fucking weed. Or half a pound. I'm like, that's a lot of weed, dude. And he actually pulls out the bag. I'm like, yeah, that's a lot of weed. Like, that's not how you... When you come back, that was kind of a weird purchase, but I don't remember the price in 99. I think it was $300 for a half ounce, but the money part at the beginning was what I would have expected in 99 for people to talk about pot. And it does come in a Ziploc or in a wrapped plastic bag with tape. But yeah, as soon as he flips it into the medical grade, and this is what I smoke, right? $3,000 for like a quarter. I was just, it's weird, man. Like, I couldn't understand that guy either. Even the smiling, creepy Joker face when he's staring at Kevin Spacey's dead head, seeing the beauty in a guy's head being shot off. it was just
It's
such a
weird. Like, I always thought that
weird
there was
thing.
more of that storyline in this movie than what there actually
It's not
is.
in
But
there, man.
it really isn't there much. I guess the last thing is how this movie wraps up, and this is honestly the most inscrutable for me, which is like Kevin Spacey tries to have sex with Mina Suvari. She says, "I'm a virgin." He, I guess, is broken from the spell. I'm like, "Oh, you're just like a girl, so let's like not do this." So magnanimous of him. And then who asked them? Like, someone asked him, like, "How are you?"
Right.
And he's like, "I'm
She
great."
does. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
She-
how are?
yeah,
And
in
he's
the
like,
kitchen.
"I'm great," and he smiles. I'm like,
What the
how?
fuck just
Like, I
happened?
I
Yeah.
don't get it. I like, where did you get to the greatness from? I
He's
didn't see
redeemed
that.
by not
Well, I just don't see that character growth, because
Yeah.
I could understand if he'd finally found like him getting back to his teenagerhood where he didn't care. He said like, that was the happiest I've ever been, is when I don't care. But it feels like he ultimately cares too much. So I don't get where the "I'm great" comes from. Like, it's felt like such a tacked on ending to me that didn't feel earned.
Just think about the critical response and the people watching this movie. Is that why they like it? I have obviously a very negative opinion about movie criticism, that they tend to want to either show off that they're more intellectual and more well-read than, anybody else, or they have deep-seated psychological issues where they only want to watch people suffering. And you think they would like horror movies more, but all of their dramas have to be these things where everybody's just fucking slitting their own wrists all the time. I mean, this is that kind of movie where it's such a drag. But yeah, is this supposed to be a redemption not only of him, but of the people watching? That, oh, well, it's okay, man, because he did the right thing. I mean, that's such an American concept, It's, you still have to pay. There
Yeah,
still has to be a balance, right? I know he gets shot in the head, but again, I don't think getting the shot in the head has anything to do with how he's living his life.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
entirely
Like,
Chris
it's
Cooper.
the two things don't match. Like, if they had somehow tied that more fully together, where Chris Cooper gets to and where he gets to cross paths,
Right. Yeah.
and then he still gets shot in the head, and like after he says "I'm great," that would be a much more tragic feeling than I think this movie actually ultimately gets to. So it feels like incomplete to me in the year 2020, and I do honestly think, and we refer to this all the time, this is still like a pre 9/11 mentality.
Sure.
I think, and I think that there was a bit of a naivety to that, but with what we've seen and how we've seen politics and like social dynamics and revolutions happen in that time span, having a guy be like, "You know what, my life isn't so bad," and it feels like a sitcom ending to what up to that point has been like a drama, and it's like, how do we get here?
Well, I mean, maybe that's how Sybil worked. And I never watched Sybil, but
Grace Under Fire was better in my opinion, but that's just me.
We're done here.
Okay, well, the machine has told us that we need to wrap up. I think we've basically answered this, but do you think this movie is still culturally relevant, Dave?
no. I mean, the one small reserved yes I will say is that at its very core, as we're seeing, likely Donald Trump has been reelected at this point. The American culture is still broken. They still chase this concept of what the best American life is, which is materialism, space, and prestige and sex. I mean, those things are still around, but the way it's portrayed, I think, is so dated. Never mind, right? Like the pager and the cars and all this stuff. It's even the context like we're talking about. There have been so many ways that these themes have been portrayed in a much more direct, poignant, and artistic way that I don't think anybody can pull that much out of this movie anymore. But I don't know,
I
maybe
think
that's
there's
just
still
me.
some fun to be had. I agree ultimately that I don't think this is culturally relevant anymore. I don't see this really surviving. I don't think there's enough there to pull it through for. I mean, like, Casablanca is ostensibly like, we're not in the middle of wartime rationing in like northern Africa, like, right, like, and not wearing like fedoras and like trench coats all the time.
Well, I had a fedora for a bit.
And like smoking cigarettes like it's going out of style. Like, there's movies like that though, that their themes though are so universal that
Yeah.
I can look past the datedness of it. I don't feel necessarily the same way here. There's certain themes I can pull out of there, and I do have an affection for it through, I will admit, probably rose-colored glasses. But it definitely is not something that I don't think I'll necessarily want or need to revisit this going forward. I might jump into it now and again, but it's not something like say like The Sixth Sense we saw a few weeks ago, which is still like rooted in the 90s, but I think there's more to that movie than its setting.
Very watchable.
Well, Dave, that does mean that we need to get to our ratings. Before we do that, though, I think we should just call out that if you enjoy our podcast, there is many different ways in which you can help to support us. The quick, easiest, and free way to do that is you can go to whatever podcast player you use, and you can leave a review and a rating, especially if you are on the Apple platform, because apparently that is like the one that helps the very most. So you can go and leave a rating or a review, and it's free to do so. You can tell other people if you're enjoying this show. Definitely let other people know so that they can kind of join in and listen to it and be like, you know what? I do need another movie podcast in my life. If you want to help us out monetarily, if you think that we're good enough for you to, support us that way, you can go to our Patreon page. You can actually support at any level. Starting at $1, you can support us. If you want to get access to some of the things that we post there each month, that starts at $5. But literally, you can go there and support us for as low as one single Canadian dollar. Although it'll be converted to whatever country you're in. So that might be $1 American dollar.
20 cents American, yeah.
It's 20 cents American, so come on. And then if you want to see us over on social media, we are at KDVSTM on Twitter and Instagram. That is also where you can find our Letterboxd lists. So if you want to go to Letterboxd, type in KDVSTM, you'll see all of the short reviews, links to all of our episodes, as well as the ability to join us over there and see how we have rated every single movie we've talked about here so far this season, which this is what? This is our 46th film that we talked about.
If nothing else, we've got endurance.
That is true. With all that being said, Dave, out of 5, what would you rate American Beauty?
I think as a movie, I'm going to go to a 2.
Okay.
I mean, some of the acting pieces.
And as a not movie, what would you rate it?
Well, I just think some of the individual performances deserve more merit. But overall, like I thought everybody except for maybe the son, the weird videographing dude, was quite good in it. I just the whole thing is not that enjoyable. So I'm going to stick with the 2. That was my apology.
As I said, I'm probably rating this higher than had this movie come out like this year or something like that. But I still enjoyed it overall, even though I'm probably never going to revisit it all that much. So I'm rating it a 4, pretty high.
Apologies, Dan.
But that means that it is going to average to a 3. And this is hilarious to me. Do you know what other film that ties it with?
South Park?
No, American Beauty is tied with American Pie.
Ah.
So, do you think this is a better or worse movie than American Pie?
I think worse, frankly.
I think better. So I don't know how we're going to end this tie here. Well, let's look at this. So I think we have been trying to rate these versus cultural relevance, correct? Or would you have a different idea on that?
I think we flip-flopped. I think at least one tie has been on rewatchability.
Yeah.
And I think the problem at this point is they're cross-genre, so the intent of what, for example, I don't think Sam Mendes makes this movie to be rewatchable. When you make American Beauty, I don't think they're not intending for people to throw this on repeat, at the local saloon. I mean, this is supposed to be
You do realize there has to be at least one person who's like watched this every single day for like the last 30 years.
I don't think they would
or 21 years, but
it's too depressing.
I'm until I change my mind again. I think that we probably should be maybe ultimately looking at this as kind of a combo, like how rewatchable / how culturally relevant is the movie itself. This is, by the way, painting me into a corner because I would probably argue that American Pie is more relevant than American Beauty is.
Yes.
At the very least, like,
more
even though it's tied into its 90s-ness itself, there is still something I think that can be gleaned from it.
It was surprising. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was surprisingly relevant. I didn't think I would like American Pie, and I actually enjoyed watching it, which is weird. And that was in spite of Chris Klein. So, I mean, that says something.
That
right
says
there.
a lot of stuff. Okay. Well, then I guess
Join me, Kyle.
I'll
Join
join
me.
you on the dark side here. That will mean then that American Beauty will be entering our list at the number 26 position.
I think we're in for some controversy. Like if we ever make it and someone goes onto
Yeah,
Letterboxd,
it's like,
they're
what
going to
the
start
fuck
yelling.
is this? What?
Yeah.
How is this rated?
This movie is rated 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, you fucking assholes. And be like, yeah, it was shit.
All right. Well, let's take a look here. I'm going to push this button, and next week we're going to be watching. Dave, honestly, this is actually one of my favorite films of all time.
Ooh, all time.
So, of all time, we get to watch the movie Magnolia.
Yeah, I
Do you
remember
remember
liking
Magnolia?
it. Yeah, I remember that it's really long.
It is super. Yeah, it's over 3 hours for sure. It's over 3 hours. Get froggy, everyone. We're gonna watch Magnolia.
This is you know what we should do is a little chart to see how many, as you brought up, how many actors are in multiple films. I mean, Tom Cruise is hustling too, man.
Well, interestingly enough, over on our Letterboxd page, it does that for you.
Oh.
So you can actually see what actors and producers and companies we have actually watched the most. And it is actually somewhat surprising when it actually gets broken out for you.
Huh. All right.
That's all I'm going to say.
So John chose number one.
There is a certain actress who we have seen the most. And
Allison Janney,
it is,
probably.
And
No?
it's not who you think it is.
Oh, damn it.
All right. Well, Dave, I'm just going to turn on this hair dryer and watch this plastic bag float around.
Oh. For a second there, I thought you were heading to that stand-up shower, and I was just going to leave. I didn't need to see that.
That is actually the machine's biggest kink.
Eyebrows weird me out.